If I was starting my business over in 2024, this is the gear that I would get. Hi, my name is Katie. I'm a brand photographer out of Dallas, Texas. I've been a photographer for 15 years and so many things have changed. So I help new photographers get their businesses off the ground so that they can turn their passion into profits. If I was starting my business over again, what gear would I start with? Now, let me preface this by saying that I do not advocate for people going into debt to start their photography businesses. Instead, you can get scrappy and you can make do with what you have until it affords you, until you've made the money to invest in more gear. I'm just going to start with that. Now, if I was looking for gear to start my business, what would I get? What would I invest in? So here's the thing, is that there is so much gear out there and there are so many choices. Like, how do you decide? Do you go for something that's, more within your budget if you have a budget, or go for like the big camera with all the bells and whistles? So here's my piece of advice. Set a budget for yourself of what you're able to spend, what you're willing to spend. Start saving your money up now, or ask someone if they wanted to gift it to you. But I would start looking at cameras now. Now in 2024, I would highly suggest that you go for the mirrorless camera. DSLRs, or digital SLR cameras, are getting phased out over the next several years. They're being discontinued. So if you're starting your business now, go for a mirrorless camera. So I'm not going to go into what a mirrorless camera is, but let me just tell you, as someone who started with a DSLR and who has transitioned to a mirrorless in the last 2 years, it is amazing. Like, the focus is just spot on, the face tracking, it's the new direction of camera technology. So if you're gonna spend your money on a nice camera, go for a mirrorless camera. Now you might be asking, what brand do I go with? I will say that I don't really think it matters. So the two big players are traditionally going to be Canon and Nikon, but with mirrorless on the scene, Sony, the Sony Alpha series, has really come up with a beautiful camera. I actually shoot on a Sony a7 IV, which I'll link in the description. But honestly, like, they all produce beautiful photos. I have friends who shoot with a Canon R6. I have friends who shoot with a Nikon Z series. So really, what I would recommend doing, if you can, if you have a camera store near you, is to go visit a camera store and kind of hold the camera in your hands, see how it feels to shoot. Another really good option, if you're not ready to buy it but you kind of want to check out different cameras, is to rent a camera. There's a number of companies that offer camera rentals. My favorite is Aperture Rent. They actually, if you're local to Dallas, Texas, they actually have a location that you can go into. You can pick up the gear from there, which is great. You can rent it over a weekend, kind of check out all the gear, see if you like it. I've done that in the past for lenses. Before I got my 24-70 2.8 lens, I rented it a number of times to figure out, like, do I want this? Do I like this? Is this something I need? So I always err on the side of, renting first, to kind of determine if you need it, if you like it, so you don't end up buying unnecessary gear. So you want to start with a camera body, and if you plan on turning your hobby or turning photography into a business and you have funds to do so, I would say go for a full frame mirrorless camera. That's just going to give you the biggest range. You don't have to deal with crop sensors, and I'm not going to go into technicalities because I am not a camera nerd, but if you have the means and the funds to invest in a full frame camera, I say go for it. What lenses would I get? So that's really gonna depend on the type of photography that you are doing, that you're interested in, that you want to do. But I will say that if all you have is kind of like the funds to invest in one lens to start with, this is what I did, over 10 years ago. I had a 50mm 1.8 to start with at the time I shot with Nikon, and that lens, it was my workhorse. It's how I learned photography. I am self-taught, so it's what I practiced on all the time. It's like a jack of all trades in the sense that like it will work for so many things. If you can only buy one lens at the beginning of your photography journey, I highly recommend a 50mm 1.8. If you can go for the 1.4, get the 1.4. And each camera brand has their versions of the same lens. So Nikon has a 50mm, Canon has a 50mm, Sony has a 50mm, and they are all great. Like I said, your best option would be to go rent it if you haven't bought one yet. Next, so depending on, if you're photographing, let's say more portraits, or if you're gonna go into weddings, so I would say a wedding photographer's beginning kit, and this is what you can work up to. You can go rent these things first before you invest in them, because they do cost a good amount of money. But if you book, some clients, you book some weddings, you can reinvest that back into your business, into better gear. So for a wedding photographer, I would recommend a 70 to 200mm. That's that zoom lens. If you've ever been to a wedding and scoped out the photographer's gear, it is very likely that they have a 70 to 200mm 2.8. That's a really great zoom lens, especially if you're doing weddings, you can't get up front with the bride and groom during the ceremony. You got to shoot from the back. That's a really great lens for that. Another really great versatile lens is a 24 to 70. I think that works really well for weddings. I actually use a 24 to 70mm 2.8 for like basically 95% of my branding photo shoots. I find it really versatile, especially when we're indoors at a styled home, a studio, or in a tight space. Having the range of going from 24 to 70 without having to switch my lens is fantastic. If you're kind of going the route of more portraits, doing, let's say, high school senior portraits, or beauty, or boudoir, or kids, families, that sort of thing, I would recommend getting an 85 1.8 or an 85 1.4. Again, each of the brands has their version of that. I think that's a beautiful portrait lens. Now, the thing to keep in mind is that you do need more space to like back up for that. So that's why I suggest, if you're not shooting in tight spaces, if you're shooting outdoors, or if you have the studio with enough space, 85 is fantastic for that. Now, if you're going the other direction and say you photograph a lot of more families or even extended families, and again, if you shoot more outdoors, a 35mm is going to be a really great lens choice for you. I wouldn't suggest it necessarily. I wouldn't put a high priority on it if you're just photographing single subjects. But if you're shooting larger groups, like say extended families or a bunch of kids together, a 35mm is going to be a really great lens for you to do that with. So if I was starting my business over, what gear would I get? Well, I would start with a camera. So, figure out which camera you like. Is it a Canon R6? Is it a Nikon Z6? Is it a Sony A7 IV, or anything above or between? If you're looking for a great starter lens, I would say the 50mm is a really great starting point. You can use it for so much. It's super versatile. You can use it for portraits, you can use it for landscapes, you can use it for groups, you can use it for everything. And then once you're ready to invest in another lens, kind of depending on what direction you're going with your business, then I would suggest you can go with zoom lenses like a 24 to 70 and a 70 to 200, or you can go with more what are called prime lenses, which have a fixed focal length like an 85mm or a 35mm. I would start with a 50mm. And it's gonna get you like so far, like without having to invest thousands of dollars in lenses. And honestly, as a photographer who's been in business for a long time, it's really helpful to figure out which lenses you like the best, so that your investment is not just gathering dust because you thought, oh, I need to have this, but really you didn't. So I hope this video was helpful. If you are a newer photographer on your journey to figuring out how to set up this photography business, be sure to subscribe and check out the next video.